This is video number 15 about cosmology, and the title for this one is Numbers Don't Lie. A common saying says that numbers don't lie, and the idea of that is that mathematics is a pure form of science. According to Aristotle, mathematics is the science of quantity. It does provide absolute certainty. Okay, it's a form of science. If a person doesn't want to say it's a form of science, it is closely connected with science. God is definitely a God of numbers. Okay, the fourth book in the Bible is entitled Numbers. The word number and its derivative occurs over 300 times in the Bible, and 40% of them occur in the book called Numbers. And it's one of the scariest books of the Bible because it reveals how precise God is keeping records of everyone. So I'm going to utilize numbers to look at the cosmos and see if that can help us in understanding a little bit more about the cosmos. In Psalm 90, verse 12, it says, "So teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom." Not only God is a God of numbers, but Satan is also infatuated with numbers. His are usually counterfeits of God. In Revelation 13, it says that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. That's Revelation 13:17. And then the next verse reveals that his number is 666. So the devil is definitely fascinated with numbers, but God himself is more accurate with his numbers because in Matthew 10, verse 30, he says, even your very hairs of your head are numbered. So I want to use that idea, that common saying that numbers don't lie, and look at the cosmos. Now, the religious theory of evolution is easily disproved by logic and science. But the problem is, it is practically impossible to get someone to understand an idea when their livelihood depends upon them not understanding. Now, we could easily replace the word livelihood in that same quote or in that same statement with their intellect depends on them not understanding, or their self-righteousness depends upon them not understanding, or we could throw in their pride depends upon them not understanding. So I'm going to use the idea of numbers don't lie in two different areas. Okay, one is population growth rate. The powers that be, the elitists, they're so concerned about the population growth rate, and they'd like to get it down to 500 million, according to the Georgia Guidestones, and that appears to be the same desire of Bill Gates. Okay, but the present day population growth rate is 1.2%. Now, if you can take that present growth rate and then simply ask the religious evolutionist, where are all the people? Where are all the people? And the idea of the population growth rate, below I'll have a link to a place called, or to a site called Human Population Calendar. It's a fun little site. And in there, you could discover the population growth rate on any percentage that you want. So if the population growth rate is maintained at 1.2%, that would disprove the idea that man could have been on the earth more than 6,000 years. Now, religious evolutionists claim man has been on the earth for 50 to 100,000 years, 50,000 to 100,000. I've seen that, span that they give. The religious evolutionists are really precise about their numbering system, give or take 2 or 3 billion. Okay, now, If you take that amoeba, once I was standing down near a college campus and a young fella, a young college student said something like, I suppose you think all these people came from two people. And I laughed and I said, I suppose you think they came from a sexless amoeba. Okay, and so let's start with Adam and Eve, and I'm so glad it wasn't Adam and Steve because none of us would be here. Okay, Adam and Eve for 6,000 years, okay, without the flood, and I'm not going to put it at 1.2 population growth rate. I'm going to drop it down to half that, 0.6%. If you have Adam and Eve, no flood, okay, no war plagues or anything, at half of the present day population growth rate would total 774 trillion people. Where are all the people? Okay, now if you take Adam and Eve for 1,652 years to the worldwide flood with Noah, to the flood of Noah's day, at 1.2% population growth rate, there would have been 723 million people that didn't have the sense to come in out of the rain. Okay, where now we put them in our fuel tanks, fossil fuels. So just think about that. When you put something in your fuel tank, you are putting in there the remnants of people who didn't have the sense to come in out of the rain. Now, I would dare say the population growth rate was much higher before the flood because of the more perfect genetics and the DNA that God programmed into them. So if we up it 0.3% to 1.5% human population growth rate, there would have been 96 billion people at the time of the flood to create these fossil fuels. Okay, now if Adam and Eve lived for 10,000 years, or meaning 10,000 years for man on the earth, and we're going to put it in half the population growth rate for Adam and Eve, 10,000 years, two people, not one amoeba, but two people at 0.6% growth rate, we would have 19 septillion people on earth. Boy, Bill Gates would have really been pulling out his hair on that one. Now, if you take Noah and his family till today, so 8 people, 4,368 years at 1.2% population growth rate, of course, without war, without plagues, without abortion, without child sacrifice. Okay, you got to throw in a bunch of stuff there. There would be 34 septillion right now. So we're going to cut that in half. Noah and his family, until today, population growth rate, 0.6% would total 1.7 trillion people. Mr. Bill Nye, or shall I change your name to Will Die, where are all the people? Numbers don't lie. Okay, now another idea I want to look at is a trigonometry, or the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, Pythagoras of Salmus, around 500 BC. Okay, so there's a theorem that's used in construction, okay, of a right triangle. How do you find the hypotenuse on that? I used this in order to square up a garage that I built, 12 by 16, 12 feet wide, 16 long. So the hypotenuse is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So the hypotenuse on that was 20 feet. Okay, so that's a pure science. That's a mathematical certainty. Okay, now there's also one for a sphere or a ball or something round. Spherical trigonometry on the curvature of the earth. Okay, if the earth is 25,000 miles around, and it's spinning at over 1,000 miles an hour. So in 24 hours, boom, you're back to the beginning. Okay, so if you're standing here and you walk 1 mile, beep, beep, that was more than a mile. Oops, better break it down lower. If you're here and you go 1 mile, you dropped 8 inches. So on this formula, no matter which way you go when you're standing here, you go here, drop a mile, you drop 8 inches. Go here, a mile, 8 inches. Here, a mile, 8 inches. Here, a mile, 8 inches. Okay, but what about 2 miles? Okay, the formula is 8 inches times miles squared will give you the amount of drop. So 1 mile, 8 inches. 2 miles, 2 times 2 is 4, times 8, 32 inches. Okay, 3 miles. Okay, 3 times 3 is 9, times 8, 72 inches, that's 6 feet. Okay, now you could simplify that and take miles squared times 0.666, or 2/3 of a foot, and you get the same thing. So at 10 miles, there should be 66.6 feet of curvature. Now, when I travel from the Lowell Church that I pastor, First Baptist Church of Lowell, to the Rensselaer Church, Bible Baptist Church, it's about 34, 35 miles by highway. But when I get on an interstate, or close to the interstate, to the exit to go to my home, it's a 10 miles between the exits. Exit 240 and I-65 and exit 230. You know, as we're traveling east on State Road 2 to before the exit, about a mile or two, maybe about 2 or 3 miles, I look to the south, I can see a sign advertising the price of gas down there at exit 230. Now that's 10 miles. That sign is not more than 66 feet tall. How am I seeing that sign? Indiana is the 10th of the flattest states of the 50 states. I should not be able to see that sign on this. Okay, now if you are on the Michigan side of Lake Michigan and you're looking toward the Chicago skyline from Lake Michigan, it will vary anywhere from 45 to 52 miles. Okay, and so here's a picture that somebody's taken from the Warren Dunes looking over the lake. And this picture was taken 52 miles away. So if you take 52 times 52 times 0.666, there should be 1,800 feet of curvature. The Sears Tower or the Willis Tower is 1,451 feet tall. Trump Tower, over 1,100 feet tall. John Hancock Center, over 1,100 feet tall. Okay, that should not ever be seen from the Michigan side, especially at Warren Dunes. Plus, when you see them, you'll notice that the buildings are not leaning away from the one who took the picture. Now, I personally haven't been up there to have that opportunity to witness that, so I cannot call that science, to be honest with you. Okay, and I know that the ones who are fanatic about the curvature has to come up with an idea. Oh, it was a mirage. Okay, now if you go over in near the Middle East, there's a canal called the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal runs 100 miles. According to our Pythagorean theorem for a sphere, 100 times 100 times 0.666, there should be 6,666 feet of curve from one end of the Suez Canal to the other end, but lo and behold, it is perfectly level for 100 miles. Why? Because in physics, is physics a part of science? Doesn't physics demonstrate that water seeks its own level? Mm-hmm. And now a person might say, yeah, but I've been at the beach of the ocean. You know, at what elevation were you there at the beach of the ocean? Sea level? Did you? Okay, sea level. Okay. And I've seen ships go over the curve. No, what you witnessed is that liquid water and vapor can distort the visual perspective of the buildings or the objects. That's what you're witnessing. The Lake Pontchartrain, causeway is 24 miles long. And if you do the math, it should have 384 feet of curvature. I wonder if the curvature was considered or accounted for during the construction of the bridge or any highway or any railroad. I wonder if surveyors do consider the curvature of the earth. Now, there's a link below the video where Bill Nye, or should I call him Will Die, Will Die presents a funny little comic thing because he's a comedian about demonstrating the curve of the earth with a boat. And you can look at it below, but he calls it science, but what he should have told you, it was pseudoscience. 1 Timothy 6:20 warns about pseudoscience. Daniel 1 verse 4 reveals that real science is compatible to the Bible. So if this is true, round globe, then the flattest state of Florida should not be flat. It should not be flatter than a pancake. Florida is the flattest of all the states. Illinois is second. North Dakota is third. Louisiana is fourth. Minnesota's fifth. Delaware, very small state, sixth. Kansas, seventh. Texas is eighth. Nevada is ninth. And Indiana is number 10. You can't have the Bonneville salt flats. It's got to have the Bonneville salt curves. Now, Florida from north to south is 447 miles. From north to south. It should, according to the Pythagorean theorem for a sphere, it should have a curvature of 133,000 feet as you go from here curving down. It should drop as you start at the north border of Florida and you go way down to the southern tip. You should have dropped. See that drop? You should have dropped like that. 133,000 feet. So just a couple examples. Numbers don't lie. And begin to observe the creation that God has created. Now, don't worship it. Don't worry about trying to save it. Begin to observe it and use some binoculars. And then fellowship with your Creator.